Let's go ahead and get back to our guest tonight. Our first guest, Peter Davenport. He is the director of the National UFO Reporting Center. Again, Peter, thank you so much for giving us some time tonight here on the weekend.
Well, I'm indebted to you, Pat. I really enjoy talking about this subject. It makes me feel good to be able to get the word out to a lot of people in a short period of time and let them know about the existence of our organization, so that if they see anything or if they have seen anything at any time in their life, if they would like to record it and make it available publicly, they will know where to go. And by the way, thanks for mentioning our website just before the break. A better, in my opinion, a better address, one easier to remember to get to our website, is just ufocenter.com rather than the nuforc.org.
Okay.
Both of them will take people to precisely the same website. It's just a different path through the forest to get where they're trying to go.
Yeah, because it's the website has got so much stuff out there. And again, I know you sent me an attachment. What are your, if you don't mind me asking, Peter, what are some of your favorite sightings, if you will? What are some that come to mind that you dwell upon a lot?
Yeah. Well, the first one that always comes to mind in response to that question is the Phoenix Lights case of March 13th, 1997. If people want to see what I'm talking about, they can go right to our website and just look at the reports for March 13th, 1997. It was a dramatic night. I worked all night that night from about 7 o'clock to 3 a.m. the following morning, and it was just, in my opinion, unambiguously the most dramatic UFO sighting, long-term dramatic UFO sighting in the history of all ufology. To give you some idea, Patrick, there were not fewer than 5 triangular-shaped craft over Phoenix that night, and they were huge. Now, huge doesn't mean anything to the people who are listening to this program, because if you're a person who studies viruses, a bacterium would look huge under the microscope, of course. But let me describe how big they appeared to be to some of the witnesses on the ground. Mrs. Susan Watson, for example, she and her 4 children estimated that the object that was hovering above their home, just 3 or 4, maybe 5 miles north of Sky Harbor Airport, subtended an arc of 135 degrees. It just completely blotted out the sky above them, and it sat there not moving for 5 minutes. 2 of her sons lay down on their backs on the lawn of their home and just marveled at this huge craft that was hovering above their house. That was probably the most dramatic sighting that I've ever covered. There have been a lot of others. Another one that comes to mind is the Todd Sees case, and I think I may have sent you a summary of that very interesting, though tragic case. On a Sunday morning, 5:30 one Sunday morning, this is the 4th of August, the year 2002, a gentleman went up to his family property on a mountain in south central Pennsylvania, and it's the county of Northumberland. And 30 minutes after he got there, a number of adult witnesses saw a man's body clad only in undergarments, T-shirt and briefs, being levitated up in a shaft of light, and they saw his body go into a silvery, metallic-looking saucer hovering above Mount Montour. And he went missing for 40 hours. Tragically, they found his body about 40 hours later, not far from his house from which he had left earlier that morning to go up to his family property. And he was dead. He was badly mutilated, although we don't know the details of that. And his remains were found suspended in a tree above ground level, as if he had been dropped from the air.
Wow.
I've lectured about it. I've done countless radio programs about it, and there's still quite a number of people who've never heard of it. I did everything in my power to try to get the news media interested in this case, and their response was just flat dead zero. Television, newspapers, radios, they wouldn't cover it.
That's a first time for me. I never heard of that one, Peter.
Yeah. Well, it was a tragic case. Richard Dolan has written a bit about it in some of his books. Very skilled UFO writer. He's got some wonderful books out there. And the Todd Sees case, as I call it, was really tragic. The police would not talk to me. The coroner of Northumberland County would not talk to me more than for about a minute. He and I talked, and he said, at the end of that minute, he said, "That's all the time I feel comfortable giving you, Mr. Davenport." And the body was so badly mutilated that they returned it. The coroner allegedly, according to one witness, returned the remains to the family in a metallic or a metal coffin, and the lid had not only been screwed down, I was told, but it had been welded shut. So the family could not look at the remains. They were not allowed to view the remains of the wife's husband, or the children of Mr. Todd Sees were not allowed to view his remains. They were told they didn't need to and wouldn't be allowed to. Very strange case indeed.
Do you believe that the mutilation was by the fall, or do you believe the mutilation was by an experiment or an examination?
I don't know for sure. I can only conjecture, Pat.
Yeah.
But a nurse who reported this to us witnessed the remains at the hospital. The remains, according to the report we received, were taken to the hospital. They were viewed by several members of the medical staff there, and then the remains were quickly spirited off to the office of the Northumberland County coroner. So I don't know, but those medical personnel were shocked by the nature of the wounds, and we have one report, unconfirmed, that there was a metallic-like object that was clamped to the upper arm of the decedent's body. I have no idea what that object was.
So look, you have to. I'd be interested. I'll have to dig into that a little bit. Just that again, that's a new one on me. I had never heard of that before.
Maybe I didn't send. I'll send you my 6-page summary of what we knew about this case on the 30th of September, 2002. And again, it never ceases to amaze me that incidents like this can occur, and somehow they're kept silent, despite repeated attempts by ufologists like me to get the story out there. It was a very, very dramatic event and very tragic because of the loss of the life of Todd Sees. And interestingly, the coroner's office, months after the death, came out with a very, very weak cause of death. They said it was caused by drug toxicity. That's the term they used. It was not an overdose. It was drug toxicity.
Yeah, the guy
tore
himself
idea what
apart.
That means.
An amazing story, Peter. I would appreciate if you could send me a little bit of info. You want to take another call?
Oh, absolutely. I love calls.
It's our good friend Harv who calls in all the time. Harv, you're on the phone with Peter Davenport. How are you, my friend?
Hey, pal. How are you?
I'm doing good. Beautiful weekend here in Salt Lake, without a doubt.
Sure is. 77 degrees. Good Lord. And those poor buggers over on Boston, they got 2.5 feet.
We got Peter on the line with you. Go ahead.
Peter Davenport. First heard you 15, probably, or more years ago on our bell.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. And I thought, this guy saw something, and then he started talking to his friends, and then that's why you went after it, or something. I don't know.
You've been on Art's show before, haven't you, Peter?
Oh, hundreds of times. Between Art and George Norrie, I've probably done 100 to 200 appearances.
You've been doing it a long time.
Yeah. What's your question, Harv? I'd be happy to answer it.
I saw some stuff, and I never told anybody. I just kept moving on with about my life. But then when I heard you, I started looking at everything, and all the way from the whole 9 yards. I want to know what was going on. What's going on? Are they all, is everything connected, or, Pete, is everything connected, or only, like, kind of maybe? What I'm saying is, I think the whole nasty lion thing is connected, personally.
You mean as far as the paranormal and everything?
Yes, sir.
What do you think, Peter?
Well, Harv's question opens the door to my greatest concern, my greatest fear. There are two things we observe unambiguously. Number one, the U.S. government doesn't want the American people even thinking about UFOs. They don't want the American people to even have a notion, a suspicion that the U.S. government is interested in the UFO phenomenon.
Anything is bigger than the government, then... Oh,
well, let me get to that, Harv.
Sorry.
Let me get to that. I'm coming to that issue.
Okay.
The second thing is it appears that the presumed occupants of these craft, namely the aliens that we all assume drive them, also do not want to show themselves clearly. So we have both the U.S. government and the aliens not wanting the average American citizen to be aware of the UFO phenomenon. What that suggests to me is the U.S. government and the aliens have the same, or may have the same agenda. Now that
I think it was Eisenhower or before him.
Pardon?
Eisenhower, Anderson, Air Force Base.
All of them. Yeah, I'm aware of that incident. But even Clinton has engaged in active disinformation to mislead the American people. You know, it was just about a year ago. I think it was April 1st or April 2nd. He was on a late-night television talk show or program. I've forgotten which one it was, but he pretended that the UFO phenomenon was not real or he didn't know anything about it. Well, going back to the Phoenix Lights case, you're probably not aware that President Bill Clinton was injured at exactly the same time that the Phoenix Lights event was taking place over Phoenix, and
actually I wasn't aware. No. Keep on. Just
minutes after that object over Sue Watson's house was intercepted by 2 F-15C military fighters. They were part of the Air Force One and Air Force Two protection group. President Clinton injured his knee while he was staying at the home of Greg Norman, the Australian golfer, in Florida. The question I have asked repeatedly...
too bad about Greg.
Harv, let me finish my point for just a second, if you will.
Sorry.
The question I have asked repeatedly is whether the President of the United States might have been injured because he was being evacuated to a military safe area as a result of the declaration of a DEFCON 3. They went from DEFCON 5 to DEFCON 3, skipping 4
I remember.
altogether. And my suspicion is President Clinton injured his knee because he was being moved by the Secret Service very rapidly in a dark house, and he was injured as a result of that. But President Clinton knows fully well that UFOs are real. I'm convinced of that. I hope that answers your question, Harv.
Yes, sir. And let me ask you a question about Sitchin.
I can barely hear you, Harv. You got to speak up a little bit.
Sitchin.
Zachariah Sitchin?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's your question for him?
Well, that was the question.
Oh, what are your thoughts on his thoughts on Sitchin? I'm going to go ahead and let him answer that, and then I'll go ahead and thanks for calling.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, brother.
Thanks, Harv.
Take care.
Thanks for the call.
What are your thoughts on Sitchin?
I hold Zecharia Sitchin in very high regard for his scholarship, the quality of his scholarship. My impression, not having known him well, but my impression is the quality of his scholarship was very high. I don't know whether his conclusions about what those ancient texts have to say about our origins as a human species on this planet, I don't know how accurate that is, but it is very intriguing, and I'm convinced that Zecharia Sitchin did his writing in a serious, sober-minded fashion. That is, he wasn't out to sell books, he wasn't out to mislead us, he was out in an attempt to get the truth to the human species on this planet. So I hold him in very high regard, and I hold his work in very high regard.
Without a doubt, some very interesting things and thoughts have come from him.
Yeah, they have. Yes, indeed.
Let's switch. We did get some questions, and I want to switch gears just a little bit. Now, you were at the at Stephen Bassett's event, correct?
Yes, the Disclosure Project, the Citizens Hearing for Disclosure, CHD, that took place almost 2 years ago now.
Is he trying to put another one together? Do you know?
Yes, he is, and I don't know the details of it, but he's relentlessly trying to get the U.S. government to tell the truth to the American people. That's a hard thing to do. I think there's only one solution to this problem, and that is simply vote all the incumbents out of office and put people in office who are fiscally conservative and who will tell the truth. Right now we seem to have a passel of representatives and senators who buy off on the notion that the American people should not know about UFOs. That seems altogether inappropriate to me in a country that calls itself a representative and free country, representative government in a free country.
Do you think, Peter, that the reason why they try to keep such a lid on this, and this is just my opinion, there's been so much lying and so much hiding and so much deception that to kind of come clean at this point in time would just make so many of these people look so bad and liars and incompetent that things would just kind of fall apart?
I don't know whether they'd fall apart. I don't think they would. But you're right on the first point, I think, Pat. That is, they've been lying to the American people now for 67 years, 68 years almost. How do you do an about-face and tell the American people, well, we do apologize. We've been telling you fibs since June of 1947, and now we're going to come clean.
Right.
The other possibility is that, and from time to time, I've accused some of our political leaders of actually lying to the American people. In moments, in fits of pique, I've done that. But in all fairness to those people, it also occurs to me that they could be being blackmailed. In other words, let me create a hypothetical scenario. An alien species comes to our planet. They approach the governments, major governments of the world, and they say, we want you to do such and such. We're going to be abducting cattle and abducting people, and we have a certain agenda here that we do not want you to reveal to your people. Otherwise, we will do something even more sinister to you. For example, we will make an airplane disappear mysteriously just to show you what we're capable of doing. I allude, of course, to MH370
right.
that disappeared almost a year ago that has yet to be found.
Right.
There have been a lot of mysterious things. The interesting part about the Todd Sees case is these creatures appear to have, in some cases, no sense of morality. They are not bound by our sense of morality or law. They may have their own, which makes their presence here a little bit problematic.
Right. And you know, and the one thing that I've said this on more than one occasion, you know, we talk to people. We've had the privilege to have abductees on the program, people that have claimed to have gone through an abduction scenario, and they always talk about, you know, the small grays doing whatever they're doing to them physically. I think a lot of these possibly in their world, in their dimension, in their time, they don't have the human emotion. A lot of them seem to be quite emotionless.
Yes.
Just as we don't think twice about, you know, having a steak for dinner, you know what I'm saying? I sometimes wonder if maybe that they're not necessarily cold and callous, but if they just it doesn't faze them. It doesn't. They view us as an experiment.
Yeah, that worries me tremendously. There was a very interesting abduction scenario that occurred in New Hampshire, and I'm not alluding to the Betty and Barney Hill abduction of September 19th, 1961. This is a different one that was reported and published by a seminary student who was out walking on a dark road in New Hampshire in 1962. So this was probably within a year of the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, the celebrated case. And he found himself being taken up a shaft of light, very similar to what I described for the Todd Sees case. And he found himself aboard a saucer. Well, my description of the case, it's a very interesting case, and the source, the witness, appears to be quite solid, very reliable. But he was taken up to a larger craft in this smaller disc-shaped craft, and he was allowed to wander around the larger ship, let's call it a mothership. And one of the questions he asked some of the people he encountered is, why are you interested in us? Your technology is vastly superior to ours. Why are you even interested in human beings on the planet Earth? And the response he got was, this is very interesting. They informed him that they were interested in the human species because human beings appeared to have something called soul, which they, the aliens, did not. Now, we could argue all night whether this is a serious-minded report or not, but it appears to be a serious-minded report from a seminary student. I'm inclined to believe it, given the large number of other abduction scenarios that have been described over the last roughly 7 decades or so.
Right. Very, very interesting.
Yes, it is. I find that my interest and my work in the field of ufology cause me to be particularly interested in religious matters as well. They are cheek by jowl, in my opinion, and of course many people have pointed out their opinion or shared their opinion that the Bible really is somehow related, whether closely or distantly related, to the UFO phenomenon. I can't answer that question. I don't feel qualified to be able to do it, but it is an intriguing proposition that religion may somehow, some way, be tied to the UFO phenomenon.
Gotcha. You want to take another call before the break?
Absolutely.
All right, caller, good evening. You're on with Peter Davenport.
Hi. Thank you for all of your reporting. I am very interested in Planet X, which is Planet 10, that may presently be approaching Earth. I like his comments. Number two, if America is not forthcoming in its rapport with aliens from outer space, what countries are? Point number three, if I have any time from a pilot, I have a very reasonable explanation as to what happened to Flight 370, if either of you are interested in knowing a pilot's opinion of what happened to them.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Our guest tonight is Peter Davenport. We had a caller call in with some questions. Go ahead, caller. Why don't you go ahead and let's go through the three that you sent in. Very interesting.
Okay, the questions are, which nations are more friendly with aliens? Number two is the Planet X. But my third question is a brief pilot's explanation as to why they were searching in the vast sea of India in the latter parts of their search concerning Flight 370, and I can briefly explain his reasoning as to what happened to Flight 370, if you'd allow me.
Well, I have no reason to believe that MH370 is related to the UFO phenomenon. I just cited that as an example of the type of thing that I watch for when I watch the news or read news reports, because it's clear that things are taking place on this planet that are UFO related, and of course the government is not going to allow us to know that. And that's the type of news report, seeming mystery, that causes me to sit up and take notice. There was indeed a disappearance of an airplane that occurred down in Phoenix, the Phoenix area or Tucson area, back in April of '97, right after the Phoenix Lights case. An experienced combat pilot flying an A-10 Warthog just disappeared. They never found him. They never found his aircraft. They never found the bombs that were attached to it. And it was right after that disappearance that I got a call from the FBI in New York City. They wanted to meet with me, and one of the questions they asked me is what I knew about that case. So I don't subscribe to the theory that MH370 disappeared into the belly of a UFO. I only cite it as an example.
What's your opinion on it as a pilot? What's your opinion on it?
I'm not a pilot, but this is a pilot's opinion.
Okay.
That it was a hot evening, that they're fully loaded with fuel and cargo and shipping things and passengers, what have you. As they took off, that there was a lot of heat generated on the front tire. Now, as they withdraw that tire into the fuselage of the airplane, that they climbing in altitude, they got warning lights as to smoke, and they were switching off various panels of electrical devices, trying to determine where is the smoke's source is. And it's the pilot's opinion that it was indeed a smoldering front tire that they had overlooked. Now, the first two things that the pilot is required to do is aviate and navigate the airplane. Those are the first priorities. So they apparently got the plane down to a lower level under these emergency conditions, turned it around 180 degrees, for the closest airport, which was the airport they had just taken off from. Set their automatic pilot for that airport, that major airport they had just left. Their air supply, the pilots have only a 15-minute oxygen air supply in their cabin, and with a smoldering front tire putting out smoke and their air supply limited to 15 minutes, they were unconscious or worse when that plane flew right over in the AM hours. Everyone perhaps at that airport was asleep or halfway shut down, and flew out over the Indian Ocean, where the plane ran out of fuel, and into the drink the plane went. Now, that's a pilot's now, and I would bet that we could find probably in their standard operating procedures that there would be new things added, to where if you smell smoke, check these tires, take it way up high, and open up your tires, and if there's cool those tires, or take it up so high there's no oxygen. If there should be a tire fire that is causing a smoke, I bet you anything that they've added that to standard operating emergency procedures.
I know the one thing that I found real interesting, there's been so much speculation, but I know that it was either General Electric or Rolls-Royce was able to get data from the engines for quite some time, and that kind of threw a little curveball into it as far as the plane went off radar, but yet GE or Rolls-Royce, whoever manufactured those engines, claimed that they ran for 45 minutes plus after the loss of signal, which, obviously they're not going to run in the water. Curious if the plane was flying straight and level, and maybe everybody blacked out and just kept on flying for a while.
If the pilots did what they're supposed to do, get it down to a lower level, perhaps radar is not going to affect it. I think, though, that those signals were satellite-based.
Were they?
And if they I think so. And they turned the plane around and headed home to where they had just took off. They have an emergency. They're trying to get to the closest airport they can. But if they became unconscious, they would have flown right over that airport on their heading that they had automatically programmed into the plane, and the plane, just without a pilot perhaps pilot unconscious or worse, would have just flown out over the Indian Ocean, and for whatever reason, it goes into the drink, who knows.
Interesting.
But that's a pilot's explanation as to what happened to 370.
Sure. Peter, what do you think about his question about Planet X?
Well, some recent evidence has raised the question whether we have a planet near our solar system that we have not yet detected. But the question of Planet X would have been resolved a long, long time ago just by its gravitational influence on other planets. These are the things that astronomers do and planet specialists. And if there were a planet out there, its presence would have been, even if it were on the quote, quote, the other side of the sun from Earth, where theoretically we could not have seen it with our telescopes, its effect as it passed other planets would have been detectable. So it's an interesting theory. I know that Zecharia Sitchin propounded that theory as well, but I just don't warm up to it because it doesn't seem to make sense in other respects. But I don't know. I'm one of those who suspects that the overwhelming majority of information that man ultimately will know is yet to be discovered. And there are going to be a lot of surprises in our future as we learn more and more about the galaxy we live in. So I don't take a hard and fast stand on something like that if I can avoid it.
What countries in the world are more friendly to outer space aliens? I personally believe that the USA has a shoot-down policy and with the goal of reverse technology of their recovered whatever they're able to shoot down and recover. But that's what countries are.
It could be both, though. The U.S. could be friendly with one species of alien, and they have an agreement that they will resist or simplistically shoot down, if possible, all other types of alien craft. I think our government's position on the UFO phenomenon is a big question mark. But that question mark, the fact that they are not sharing this information with the American public, profoundly worries me. It would be okay if we had a totalitarian state, because in a totalitarian state, the government dictates to its citizens what they must do. However, we have a representative government. We are told by our Constitution, which makes it very unambiguous, that our representatives in Washington, D.C. work for us. When they suddenly start lying to us, is the time to get rid of them and replace them with somebody else who's going to tell us the truth so we can vote intelligently. That's my position on the matter.
Have you ever heard of the Riverboat Bob story down on the Colorado River? Boat, who was a retired man who was apparently a top security guy out of L.A. International Airport, retired. Have you ever heard the Riverboat Bob story?
I don't know that case.
Well, I'm surprised it hasn't shown up. If you want me to quickly relate it, it's very interesting as to what our government is doing, both, and I can relate it very quickly if you'd like me to.
Yeah, why don't you give us just a real quick overview because we're coming close.
This retired gentleman is on his riverboat out in the Colorado River. He's doing what men in their late 60s do in the middle of the night. He's out there looking at the stars and relieving himself. And here up in the sky comes a whirling bright object coming hurtling down, and strikes the earth. Now, this is a security man that worked at the L.A. airport. Was either number one or number two security administrator at the airport. Strikes the earth, bounces off the earth, goes over a ravine where he can't see it. Immediately and quickly, small helicopters, USA obviously, military hospital with big spotlights, are in the area circling it. They locate the wreckage, and then shortly thereafter, a big heavy lift helicopter comes in. He can't see it because it's over a knoll, and the big heavy lift copter takes the wreckage, and they're all out of there quickly. Now, the local talk radio station and newspaper in that Nevada, Arizona area down there were reporting this, and they got the men in black with the windshield, the cars without any, with their windshields all dark and closed, their side windows dark and closed, talking to the ownerships of the various talk show radio and local newspapers, saying, "You're not going to report this story. You're going to end your coverage of this story." And the men in black from Washington, D.C., or from an agency of Washington, D.C., put a lot of pressure on the local news media. Well, so that, to me, is a very telling story that we do shoot down, and we are interested in reverse technology.
Yeah. There's also the Kecksburg incident, December 9th, 1965. But what I'd like, if you know of newspaper articles that were published on this case you just cited, I'd be most grateful if you just forward me the links or tell me where I can read the story. I'd like to have that one on file. But I find it hard to believe that the U.S. government has influence over all newspapers. If I were a newspaper editor, that's exactly what I would want, is to have a U.S. government agent come into my office and tell me that I could not publish a story. If they brought pressure to bear to back up their threat, that's exactly what you would want, because you'd have, well, possibly a false arrest case against them, or there are many things you could do.
Very true.
Well, you're just small-town businessmen trying to run a small radio station or a small local paper.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Hey, thanks for your call tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
A lot of interesting stuff out there, Peter. So many stories.
Yep, there sure are. And, boy, it's been really fun to do a program with you, Pat. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed our callers and their comments tonight. And it's been a privilege, actually, to have a 2-hour opportunity to bring some of the interesting information I've collected over the last 21 years to a large body of listeners. I hope they've enjoyed it. And most of all, I'd like to invite them, if they've ever had a sighting at any time in their life, they don't have to telephone. I'd like them to just sit down and write out a 1 or 2 or 3 paragraph synopsis of what they saw and submit that report, that statement, using our online report form at UFOcenter.com.
We've got a couple minutes left, Peter. What's on the horizon for you?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. One of the subjects I was hoping to talk on tonight was my proposal for detecting UFOs using a passive radar system.
Okay, we got a few minutes. Let's go ahead and talk about it.
Well, it's something that I proposed just about 20 years ago. It's something that came to my attention because I used to work in the venture capital industry, and at one time a company in Seattle came to us called Meteor Communications Corporation that built equipment for bouncing transmitted signals off the ionized trails behind meteors in the Earth's atmosphere.
Okay.
And it occurred to me that if you can do that, if you can detect a signal that's bounced off a meteor trail, why couldn't you detect the reflected signal off of something else in the atmosphere or even beyond? I wrote a paper. People can read my paper. It's on our homepage at UFOcenter.com. I wrote a paper for the 2004 MUFON Symposium that was held in Denver. And the day my paper was published on the Internet, I got a call from a senior officer at the Central Intelligence Agency in the Washington, D.C. area, He said, Mr. Davenport, I'm calling you because I just saw your paper. He said, if you build the type of system that you describe in your paper, you will be successful in answering the question of whether UFOs are real or not. That was a very, very interesting telephone conversation. I have tried to raise the necessary funds to build such a system and deploy it across the North American continent for 20 years. And to date, I have collected not a single penny of support for that project. Very, very frustrating. However, it is eminently feasible. I suspect that people, namely the U.S. government, have been using passive radar systems to detect UFOs and other objects in our atmosphere. This is how they detected, for example, space debris passing over, above, or through American airspace. They used to operate what was called the Fence, or the U.S. Naval Space Surveillance System. And my suspicion is that it is within our capability, that is, our being amateur ufologists, now because of the development of very sophisticated personal computers, it is now within our capability to detect UFOs by listening for the reflected radio and television signals that would be expected to bounce off of them.
Peter, I've got to wrap up, but let's keep in touch offline a little bit about this.
You bet.
I wonder if we could do it from a little different perspective. It's been an honor to have you here, and I hope I can get you back in the real near future, and we can go another couple hours.
Sounds like a good plan, and I, again, really appreciate the invitation, Pat.
Okay, my friend, have a good night, and I promise I will stay in touch.
Okay, thanks.
Take care. Good night.
Bye.